humility is often invisible until the moment it demands attention. The grand dining hall of Jinwoo's Seoul estate glimmered under the soft golden chandeliers, yet the warmth of the light seemed almost ironic as tension hung thick in the air. Guests murmured, their eyes flicking between the ornate place settings and the sudden commotion near the far end of the room. The black maid, had been diligently arranging the silver cutlery when Seo-yeon, Jinwoo's wife, swept into the space with a swift, sharp movement, tearing at Maid's uniform in front of everyone. The sound was crisp and impossible to ignore, a jarring contrast to the soft classical music playing in the background. Mai froze for a heartbeat, her hands tightening around the edge of the tray she carried, her posture unwavering despite the sting of embarrassment creeping up her neck. Whispers surged like a tide around the room, punctuated by a few tentative chuckles, each one reverberating off the polished hardwood floors and high ceilings. Jinwoo stood a few feet away, his tall frame motionless, a calm that bordered on a stillness almost unnerving. The camera of the mind might linger on his eyes, dark and unreadable, observing every twitch and subtle expression. His attention was drawn not to the laughter, but to Mai herself, noting the steady way she held herself despite the public humiliation. The room seemed to contract around her quiet dignity, her head bowed slightly. Yet there was no crumpling, no appeal, just a silent endurance that contrasted sharply with the performative chaos around her. Seo-yeon, emboldened by the initial reaction, took a step closer, her tone sharper now, dripping with sarcasm and the ease of someone used to commanding attention. "Did you think you could serve without flaw?" she said, loud enough for the nearest guest to hear, relishing the shock on their faces. Mai responded with a subtle, respectful bow, hands folded, the very gesture radiating an unspoken strength that began to pull at the attention of the onlookers. Jinwoo's gaze remained fixed, absorbing every nuance, every flicker of fear and composure, the contrast weaving a story in his mind more compelling than any words could. A memory flickered through him, Mai carefully tending to his son during a sudden fever, her hands gentle, precise, and tireless, a quiet heroism that had gone unnoticed by all but him. The murmurs of the guests began to fade in his perception, replaced by the silent weight of recognition and reflection. Time seemed to stretch as the tension thickened. Every detail of the ornate hall, the subtle play of light on the polished silverware, the gentle sway of curtains in the air-conditioning breeze, contributed to the cinematic tableau. And in that stretch, a subtle shift occurred. The room, still and expectant, waited for a reaction that was no longer dictated by ridicule. Mai's eyes, steady and unwavering, met the floor for a moment before lifting slightly to acknowledge the silent power that had always been beside her in the form of Jinwoo, unseen by most, yet profoundly present. The chandelier light caught in the fine fabric of her uniform, tattered though it was, casting a delicate halo around her composure. The first beat of true tension had set the stage, the silence waiting to be filled with a justice that would not need to raise its voice. Each breath, each flicker of movement, carried the weight of anticipation, the kind that only occurs when dignity and authority collide in an unexpected place, setting the scene for the reckoning that would quietly, yet irrevocably, follow. The room remained suspended in a heavy, expectant quiet, the guests shifting slightly in their chairs, unsure whether to resume conversation or maintain the reverent pause that had settled over the grand dining hall. Mai remained in her position, hands delicately folded, her posture impeccable despite the uneven hem of her uniform, the slight fray from the earlier tearing now illuminated by the warm light of the chandeliers. Jinwoo's eyes scanned the room, capturing every glance, every subtle gesture, as if mapping the undercurrent of judgment and curiosity that pulsed beneath the polished surfaces of crystal glasses and gleaming silverware. He stepped closer, his polished shoes echoing faintly against the hardwood floor, each movement measured, deliberate, drawing a quiet, almost imperceptible tension in the air that made the guests lean forward without realizing it. Seo-yeon, still flushed from her previous action, straightened her posture, attempting to reclaim dominance. Yet her voice faltered as she observed the shift in atmosphere, the once dismissive audience now silently awaiting the next cue. Jinwoo's gaze fell upon my once more, the corners of his eyes softening slightly as he noted the way she lifted her chin ever so gently, acknowledging his silent presence with a grace that commanded attention without a single word. The memory of her care for his young son surfaced vividly in his mind, the quiet moments she had spent tending to fevers, adjusting blankets, and soothing fears while he watched from a distance, never once expecting recognition. The contrast between her understated heroism and the performative humiliation she endured in the present moment created a weight in the room that no one could ignore. Guests exchanged nervous glances, whispers stifled by the invisible pressure of observation, their laughter extinguished by the gravity of Jinwoo's silent appraisal. Seo Yun's lips parted as if to continue, yet the energy in the room subtly shifted, making her hesitate, revealing cracks in the carefully maintained armor of authority she had projected. Mai's calm remained unwavering, the soft swish of her uniform against the polished floor becoming a subtle rhythm that underscored the quiet tension, her every gesture amplified by the hushed surroundings. Jinwoo's hand moved with almost imperceptible precision, resting lightly on the back of a nearby chair, the smallest motion carrying a weight of unspoken judgment and emerging protection that began to settle like a palpable force around Mai. A soft, ambient light played across the delicate details of the room, glinting off glasses and silver, casting gentle shadows that seemed to echo the silent confrontation. The guests felt the shift as a collective breath, the atmosphere thickening with anticipation, the room itself seeming to hold in its own breath, waiting for the inevitable movement that would transform quiet endurance into a visible acknowledgement of dignity. Mai's eyes briefly met Jinwoo's, a subtle nod passing between them, a silent affirmation that she had not faltered, that her composure remained intact, and that respect, though challenged, had not been diminished. The chandeliers above swayed faintly, the soft hum of the heating system and the distant city, sounds beyond the large windows providing a quiet backdrop to the intense stillness within. Every detail, the reflective surfaces, the muted colors of the decor, the polished wood, and the measured movements of both the observer and the observed, wove together to create a cinematic tableau of quiet strength and mounting anticipation, setting the stage for a resolution that would arrive without force, a demonstration of justice that spoke through composure, attention, and the understated power of recognition. The subtle tension in the room grew more pronounced as Jinwoo's gaze held steady upon Mai, a quiet authority radiating from him without a single word spoken. The guests, previously uncertain, now seemed to sense that the natural order of attention had shifted, and the room's atmosphere became charged with an unspoken expectation. Each of Mai's careful movements, the adjustment of her tray, the gentle smoothing of her uniform, was magnified in the stillness, her composure acting as a quiet anchor amidst the unsettled energy. Seo Yun, sensing the change, faltered, the confidence that had allowed her to assert dominance over the moment wavering as she recognized that the audience had begun to observe more than her actions. Jinwoo, tall and impeccably dressed, allowed his eyes to linger on the subtle interplay of posture and poise, acknowledging with silent approval the grace that Mai maintained under scrutiny. A memory surfaced in his mind, clear and vivid, of Mai tending to his son on a rainy afternoon, the child's small body trembling with fever while she adjusted the blankets and whispered calming words, her hands steady and gentle, her attention unwavering despite the fatigue that would have overwhelmed most. That recollection cast a new light upon the present moment, highlighting the disparity between the casual mockery of Seo Yun and the enduring strength of Mai, whose dignity had not faltered even when challenged. The guests, sensing the tension in Jinwoo's measured observation, instinctively softened their own expressions, the once lively whispers subdued to murmurs, as if the room itself had adopted a more attentive, almost reverential tone. Maya's eyes, dark and steady, briefly met Jinwoo's, a silent dialogue passing between them, affirming mutual recognition of the moment's significance. Every detail of the hall, the polished wood floors, the crystal glasses catching the ambient light, the slight sway of the chandelier chains overhead, contributed to the cinematic quality of the scene, emphasizing the contrast between the deliberate grace of Mai and the fleeting, performative arrogance of Seo-yeon. Jinwoo's presence alone seemed to imbue the space with a sense of measured judgment, and the subtle shift in energy allowed the audience to perceive the deeper narrative unfolding silently. The air, heavy with anticipation, carried the faint scent of fresh flowers from the vases lining the room, mingling with the subtle aroma of tea and pastries prepared for the guests, grounding the tension in a tangible, sensory reality. Each guest became acutely aware of the balance between authority and humility, observing how respect and recognition were earned not through loud declarations, but through steady, deliberate actions. Maya's poise became the focal point, her calm demeanor radiating quiet power that needed no amplification, a testament to the strength of her character. The scene stretched, every second amplifying the importance of silent observation and measured responses, each movement and glance contributing to a tableau in which dignity quietly demanded acknowledgement. Jinwoo's next action, though not yet articulated, promised to honor the integrity and resilience that Mai had demonstrated, preparing the room for the inevitable and profound shift in social dynamics that was about to take place. A shift rooted not in confrontation, but in the subtle assertion of justice through grace and recognition. Jinwoo finally moved, his tall figure cutting a precise path through the soft hum of anticipation in the grand dining hall. Each footstep, deliberate and controlled, resonated faintly against the polished oak floors, a subtle rhythm that demanded attention without raising a single word. Guests instinctively straightened in their seats, their collective gaze drawn to the unfolding moment, as if the air itself had conspired to focus all eyes on the figures at the far end of the room. Mai remained poised, her hands still folded neatly, her eyes flickering briefly to Jinwoo as he approached, a silent acknowledgement passing between them, heavy with unspoken understanding. Seo-yeon, caught in a moment of uncertainty, attempted to mask her unease behind a composed posture, yet her tension was palpable, a stark contrast to the serene confidence radiating from Mai. Jinwoo stopped just a few feet away, his eyes meeting Mai's with a depth of recognition that seemed to stretch time, honoring her unwavering grace in the face of earlier humiliation. The faint scent of polished wood and fresh flowers mingled with the subtle warmth of the chandelier light, bathing the scene in a cinematic glow that emphasized every subtle gesture and glance. He extended a hand, not as a command, but as a gesture of affirmation, signaling the acknowledgement of the dignity she had maintained throughout the ordeal. The guests, silent and observant, felt the weight of the moment as a collective understanding settled over them, the unspoken lesson in humility and respect imprinting itself upon the space without a word being uttered. Mai, taking a measured step forward, allowed Jinwoo's hand to rest lightly on her shoulder, a silent seal of recognition that conveyed far more than words could express. The tension that had dominated the room dissipated, replaced by a quiet reverence. The once murmuring audience now absorbed in the subtle power dynamics that had shifted so completely in a matter of moments. Seo-yeon's carefully maintained composure faltered slightly, her eyes betraying the surprise of realizing that influence and presence alone could not command the respect that true character earned naturally. The chandeliers overhead caught the faint movement of Jinwoo and Mai, their reflections dancing softly on the crystal and polished surfaces, turning the act into a visual statement of measured authority and quiet resilience. Every guest became attuned to the nuances of posture, eye contact, and the unspoken exchange that had altered the course of the evening. The ambient light accentuated the textures of the room, the gleaming silverware, the dark wood, the delicate floral arrangements, each detail framing the scene with precision, reinforcing the narrative of dignity prevailing over mockery. Mai's steady composure, coupled with Jinwoo's subtle yet unmistakable affirmation, transformed the hall into a tableau where respect was both witnessed and enforced silently. The soft murmur of distant traffic from outside the large windows contrasted with the intensity within, highlighting the gravity of small gestures and controlled presence. In that extended moment, the balance of power and recognition shifted definitively, illustrating that true authority was exercised with mindfulness, respect, and acknowledgement of courage, leaving every observer with an indelible impression of integrity, grace, and the quiet, inescapable triumph of dignity over humiliation. The hall remained charged with a quiet intensity as Jinwoo and Mai stood together, the space between them a silent bridge connecting resilience and acknowledgement. The guests, still seated, had settled into a respectful stillness, their eyes following every subtle movement, aware that the narrative of the evening had shifted irrevocably. Mai adjusted her stance slightly, allowing the faint light to catch the softened edges of her uniform. The previous tear, now almost inconsequential in the grand context of the moment, a symbol of endurance rather than embarrassment. Jinwoo's presence beside her provided a measured affirmation, the smallest of gestures, an encouraging nod, a subtle straightening of posture, conveying more than words could, signaling to all present that dignity had its place, no matter the previous display of mockery. Seo-yun, standing slightly to the side, had withdrawn into herself, the certainty she had wielded earlier replaced by a dawning recognition that influence alone could not dictate the moral weight of the room. The soft clink of silverware and faint murmur of conversation that began to re-emerge from the periphery underscored the contrast between the ordinary rhythm of the evening and the extraordinary stillness at the center, where integrity had silently claimed precedence. Jinwoo's eyes swept over the gathering once more, observing not only the reactions, but also the subtle dynamics between those who had attempted to impose shame and those who had endured it. Each guest felt the gravity of observation, the way respect could be conferred through acknowledgement rather than coercion, the difference between appearance and substance made evident in the quiet interplay between Mai and Jinwoo. A delicate shaft of sunlight from the tall windows painted gentle highlights across the polished wood floors, drawing attention to the reflective surfaces of the room, the crystal accents, and the graceful posture of Mai. Every detail reinforcing the visual narrative of calm authority prevailing over superficial disdain. The scent of freshly brewed tea and light pastries from the prepared tables mingled with the lingering floral notes, grounding the scene in sensory reality while the moral resonance of the moment unfolded. Mai's quiet confidence and Jinwoo's subtle affirmation transformed the dynamics entirely, turning what had begun as humiliation into a moment of unspoken vindication, a testament to the power of composure, observation, and thoughtful response. Guests exchanged glances, some nodding imperceptibly, others leaning back in silent acknowledgement of the unfolding lesson. That true strength was measured in grace under pressure. That character revealed itself not in loud declarations, but in the steady management of one's own dignity. The chandeliers swayed faintly with the air, the soft illumination highlighting the contrast between the fleeting discomfort of mockery and the enduring presence of earned respect, capturing the room in a tableau of nuanced power and recognition. Every breath, every glance, every subtle shift in posture contributed to the atmosphere, creating a cinematic impression of balance restored, a moment where silence carried as much weight as action, and the house itself seemed to pause in reflection. The acknowledgement of Mai's poise, reinforced by Jinwoo's quiet support, left an indelible mark upon the space, a shared understanding among all present that true dignity could not be diminished, only revealed and honored, a lesson embodied in the stillness and subtlety of the scene. The soft murmur of the guests began to fade into an almost reverent silence as Jinwoo maintained his steady presence beside Mai, his eyes scanning the room with measured precision, observing the subtle ripples of realization spreading across the faces of those present. The golden light from the chandeliers highlighted the careful composure of Mai, her movements deliberate yet gentle as she arranged a tray of desserts with quiet confidence, each action reinforcing the sense of calm authority that now defined the space. Sia-yun, still standing slightly apart, appeared to shrink into the background, the realization settling in that her previous assertion of dominance had been met not with confrontation, but with the subtle, undeniable power of recognition and respect. The polished hardwood floors reflected the ambient glow, emphasizing the contrast between the performative arrogance of earlier moments and the measured dignity of the present. Jinwoo's hand rested lightly on the back of a chair, a subtle signal of support, his presence lending weight to Mai's composure without the need for overt declaration. The air, infused with the scent of fresh flowers and lightly brewed tea, seemed to carry the significance of the moment, each breath a reminder of the careful balance between humility and authority. Guests shifted slightly, their expressions softening as they absorbed the unfolding lesson, noticing the interplay between grace under pressure and the quiet assertion of respect that required no dramatics to enforce its truth. Mai's eyes, calm and focused, swept over the room with a quiet awareness, acknowledging the guests with subtle nods, her poise conveying that true strength resided in composure and the ability to endure without losing integrity. Jinwoo's gaze met hers briefly, a silent affirmation passing between them that carried the weight of mutual understanding and shared history, a recognition of the quiet heroism that had gone unnoticed by most until this very moment. The ambient light captured the delicate movements of both figures, highlighting the reflective surfaces of the crystal and polished silverware, the intricate details of the floral arrangements, and the understated elegance of the room's furnishings, all contributing to the cinematic resonance of the scene. Seo-yun's earlier confidence wavered further as she observed the effect of the unspoken exchange, the subtle but unmistakable authority that now emanated from Mai under Jinwoo's measured acknowledgement. The gentle sway of the chandeliers above and the distant hum of the city beyond the tall windows created a sensory backdrop that contrasted with the intensity within, emphasizing the significance of restrained power and the impact of thoughtful observation. Every subtle gesture, from the tilt of a head to the careful placement of a hand on a tray, contributed to the atmosphere of quiet resolution, the room itself seeming to recognize the triumph of dignity and the enduring value of integrity. Guests who had laughed or whispered moments ago now leaned forward slightly, their attention fully captured, as the narrative of respect and composure unfolded naturally without need for words. Jinwoo's controlled presence, coupled with Mai's calm endurance, transformed the tension into a palpable lesson, demonstrating that acknowledgement and patience could shift perception, enforce respect, and quietly restore balance. The stillness of the room, punctuated only by soft breaths and the subtle sounds of movement, became the stage upon which the values of humility, strength, and recognition were observed, leaving an indelible impression upon everyone present and sealing the understanding that true dignity asserts itself through quiet resilience and a measured acknowledgement of character. The atmosphere in the grand dining hall remained heavy with anticipation, a silence filled with the weight of observation and reflection. Mai moved with a calm precision, the tray in her hand steady, each delicate placement of pastries or teacups executed with care that drew the eye of every guest. The golden light from the chandeliers caught the subtle movement of her hands, casting gentle highlights across the polished wood floors, the crystal glassware, and the soft folds of her uniform, now bearing the faint evidence of the earlier incident, yet undiminished in dignity. Jinwoo's presence beside her was a quiet anchor, his posture upright and deliberate, his gaze sweeping over the room with careful calculation, acknowledging the shift in attention without needing to raise his voice or issue a command. Seo-yun, sensing the shift, remained still, her earlier assertiveness replaced by a cautious watchfulness, as she observed the way the room had subtly aligned with the calm authority now emanating from Mai. The guests, perceptive and attentive, felt the change in energy, their earlier amusement replaced by a quiet respect. Each glance and soft intake of breath acknowledging the balance of composure and recognition that had been established. The faint hum of conversation from the periphery of the room had largely ceased, leaving only the soft, deliberate movements of Mai and the understated presence of Jinwoo to guide the unspoken narrative. The smell of fresh flowers mingled with the subtle scent of fine tea, creating an atmosphere that was both serene and charged with the moral weight of the moment, each sensory detail reinforcing the significance of the interaction. Mai's eyes met Jinwoo's for a brief, fleeting moment, the silent communication conveying gratitude, mutual understanding, and a recognition of shared awareness. A quiet affirmation that the ordeal had transformed into an unspoken moment of acknowledgement and justice. The chandeliers above cast soft, shimmering reflections across the room, highlighting the subtle shift in posture, the careful positioning of hands, and the grace that had carried Mai through the earlier humiliation. The audience, now wholly attentive, became aware of the quiet demonstration of character, the way dignity could assert itself through patience, composure, and the careful exercise of observation and understanding. Jinwoo's hand lightly brushed the back of a nearby chair, a measured gesture that reinforced his support without needing words, a silent signal that respect was being conferred and that the previous imbalance of authority had been righted. Every small movement, from the tilt of a head to the precise placement of a teacup, contributed to the cinematic tableau unfolding before the guests, illustrating the subtle interplay between humility, recognition, and the quiet enforcement of moral clarity. The soft ambient light, the polished surfaces, and the gentle stillness of the room amplified the impact of these gestures, creating a visual and emotional resonance that conveyed as much meaning as spoken dialogue ever could. As Mai continued her work with unwavering poise, and Jinwoo observed with quiet approval, the room collectively absorbed the lesson that true authority and respect were earned through steadfastness, attentiveness, and the deliberate acknowledgement of character, leaving every observer with a lasting impression of integrity, patience, and the subtle power of dignity sustained in silence. The soft, golden light from the chandeliers bathed the grand dining hall in a serene glow, casting delicate reflections across the polished floors and crystal accents, each shimmer emphasizing the quiet transformation that had taken place in the room. Mai continued her movements with careful deliberation, the tray in her hands steady and precise, each placement a testament to her composure and resilience, drawing the attention of the guests not through spectacle, but through the understated power of her presence. Jinwoo stood nearby, tall and unyielding, his gaze sweeping over the assembly with a quiet authority that required no words, acknowledging both the subtleties of behavior and the unspoken dynamics at play. The room had shifted, the earlier tension replaced by a pervasive respect that radiated from Mai's calm demeanor and was reinforced by Jinwoo's measured observation. Seo-yun, positioned slightly to the side, seemed to diminish within the space, the realization dawning that true influence was earned not through displays of power or humiliation, but through the consistent demonstration of integrity and composure. The faint hum of conversation had all but disappeared, replaced by the soft sound of footsteps and the subtle clinking of fine china, each note magnifying the significance of the scene as the guests became witnesses to a quiet form of justice. Jinwoo's eyes met Mai's briefly, a silent exchange passing between them, acknowledging past kindnesses, mutual understanding, and the enduring strength that had been evident throughout the evening. Every movement was infused with purpose. Mai's careful adjustment of a cup, a slight shift in stance, the graceful sweep of her hands across the tray, each gesture reinforcing the narrative of dignity maintained under pressure. The chandeliers above swayed faintly, their light catching on the reflective surfaces of crystal and silver, amplifying the subtle power dynamics at work and highlighting the quiet but undeniable presence of respect in the room. Guests leaned forward slightly, their expressions a mixture of admiration and contemplation, absorbing the lesson unfolding before them. That patience, grace, and composure could transform perceived weakness into a demonstration of strength and command genuine recognition. The scent of fresh flowers mingled with the aroma of prepared pastries and tea, grounding the moment in tangible reality, even as the moral and emotional weight of the interaction resonated with every observer. The interplay between Maya's calm endurance and Jinwoo's measured authority created a rhythm that the room could not ignore. Each gesture and glance building toward the subtle reinforcement of character and the quiet elevation of respect. Even the ambient sounds from the city beyond the tall windows seemed to soften in deference to the scene, allowing the focus to remain on the silent affirmation of dignity prevailing over mockery. The balance between humility and recognition, demonstrated in the meticulous movements of Mai and the restrained but unmistakable support of Jinwoo, created a tableau of quiet power that left an indelible impression on every person present. The chandelier's light, the reflective surfaces, and the careful orchestration of posture, gesture, and observation combined to form a cinematic portrayal of justice enacted not through confrontation, but through the subtle assertion of respect, patience, and the enduring strength of character, leaving the room transformed and every guest profoundly aware of the invisible yet undeniable force of true dignity. The hall seemed to hold its breath, the soft glow of chandeliers casting long, delicate shadows across the polished wood floors, each reflection emphasizing the poised figures at the center of the room. Mai continued her careful, deliberate movements, placing a small silver plate of desserts with exact precision, the faint sound of porcelain meeting polished would echoing lightly in the hushed space. Every gesture she made was infused with quiet confidence, a testament to her resilience and the steady grace that had carried her through the earlier humiliation. Jinwoo stood nearby, his tall frame a quiet presence of authority, eyes attentive and calm, noting the subtle shifts in the expressions of the guests and the slight hesitations in Seo Yun's stance. The room had shifted perceptibly, the energy transformed from tension to reflective respect, each observer sensing that the balance of recognition and authority had been quietly but definitively restored. Guests exchanged glances, some nodding ever so slightly, others leaning forward as if to better absorb the significance of the unspoken exchange unfolding before them. The soft aroma of fresh flowers mixed with the faint scent of pastries and tea, grounding the scene in tangible reality while the moral weight of the moment resonated with each person present. Jinwoo's subtle gestures, a gentle tilt of the head, a measured step closer, the faint acknowledgement of Maya's poised movements, reinforced the silent narrative, emphasizing that composure and integrity were recognized and valued. Maya's eyes met his for a brief instant, a silent affirmation passing between them, acknowledging past care, mutual understanding, and the unshakable strength she had demonstrated throughout the evening. The light played delicately across the crystal and silver, highlighting the reflections of both figures as if the room itself were capturing the tableau of dignity prevailing over superficial authority. Seo Yun's earlier confidence had clearly diminished, her composure faltering as she sensed the shift in attention and recognition, realizing that respect could not be commanded through mockery alone. The guests became increasingly attentive to the nuances of movement, posture, and eye contact, absorbing the lesson in patience, grace, and the quiet power of consistent character. Every subtle adjustment, the tilt of a hand, the careful placement of a tray, the measured pacing of steps, added depth to the unfolding narrative, illustrating that the assertion of dignity did not require loud declarations, only steadfast composure and thoughtful acknowledgement. The ambient city sounds outside the tall windows seemed to soften in contrast to the intense focus within the room, the faint hum of traffic serving as a backdrop that highlighted the importance of the interactions at the center. Jinwoo's measured presence, combined with Maya's calm endurance, created a rhythm that resonated through the entire space, transforming tension into an instructive, cinematic moment where integrity, patience, and respect for character prevailed without a word spoken. The chandeliers above swayed slightly, their light catching on the reflective surfaces of the polished floors, crystal glasses, and silverware, emphasizing the cinematic quality of the scene and reinforcing the unspoken triumph of quiet dignity over superficial control. Every observer in the room felt the moral resonance of the moment, understanding through observation alone that true authority and respect were cultivated through measured attention, silent acknowledgement, and the unwavering demonstration of character, leaving a lasting impression that would endure long after the evening had ended. The quiet intensity in the grand dining hall deepened as Jinwoo moved slightly, the subtle adjustment of his stance signaling a poised acknowledgement of Maya's composure and quiet strength. Each step he took was deliberate, the polished hardwood floors reflecting the soft glow of the chandeliers above, creating gentle highlights that emphasized the cinematic presence of both figures. Mai continued to navigate the room with careful precision, her movements a study in calm and controlled grace, each placement of a cup or dessert plate reinforcing the integrity that had carried her through the evening. Guests sat in rapt attention, their expressions softening as they absorbed the weight of the silent exchange, understanding that respect was being communicated not through loud proclamation, but through measured observation and deliberate recognition. The subtle aroma of fresh flowers and the faint scent of brewed tea filled the space, grounding the moment in sensory reality while reinforcing the emotional resonance of what was unfolding. Jinwoo's eyes scanned the room, noting the gentle shifts in attention, the subtle tension easing from the shoulders of the audience, and the way So-yeon's once confident posture now seemed subdued in the presence of quiet authority. The ambient lighting played delicately across reflective surfaces, highlighting the precise movements and gestures that formed the core of the narrative unfolding in silence. Each soft clink of porcelain and the delicate rustle of fabric as Mai adjusted her uniform contributed to the layered atmosphere, illustrating that grace under scrutiny could command a form of respect that words alone could not convey. Jinwoo's subtle nod and the slight turn of his gaze toward Mai served as an unspoken confirmation, a recognition of her steadfastness and the quiet dignity with which she had endured the earlier display of mockery. Guests sensed the shift, their attention now fully engaged in the nuanced interplay of observation, acknowledgement, and character, each aware that the moment carried a deeper lesson about integrity, patience, and the quiet assertion of authority. The soft light glinting off crystal and silverware created a visual rhythm, drawing the eye to the precision of every movement, reinforcing the understated power of composure maintained under scrutiny. So-yeon's attempts to reclaim dominance were muted by the pervasive sense of calm, control emanating from Mai, and reinforced by Jinwoo's measured presence, highlighting the difference between fleeting displays of authority and the enduring impact of genuine character. Every subtle gesture, glance, and measured movement worked in concert to create a tableau of moral clarity, one that left an indelible impression on the room, illustrating that dignity and respect were earned through resilience, patience, and attentive acknowledgement. The distant hum of the city beyond the tall windows contrasted with the stillness inside, emphasizing the significance of the moment, and each observer could sense the culmination of tension, the silent yet profound shift in power dynamics, and the quiet triumph of enduring composure and integrity over superficial authority. In this extended moment of observation, acknowledgement, and subtle affirmation, the room seemed to collectively recognize the quiet, inescapable force of true dignity, leaving a lasting impression upon everyone present, as the interplay of grace, awareness, and measured authority established a standard of respect and acknowledgement that would resonate far beyond the evening itself. The room remained enveloped in a profound, expectant silence, the golden glow of the chandeliers above casting elongated shadows across the polished floors, each reflection capturing the measured, deliberate movements of Mai as she continued her service with unwavering composure. Her hands, steady and precise, carried trays of delicate pastries and steaming tea, each placement a demonstration of grace that drew the attention of the guests not through spectacle, but through quiet mastery of her craft. Jinwoo stood nearby, his tall frame exuding calm authority, his eyes scanning the room with a careful, attentive gaze that acknowledged both the subtle shifts in guest attention and the quiet endurance of Mai. Fei-yun lingered at the edge of the scene, her posture slightly subdued, the realization dawning that her earlier attempt at control had been rendered ineffective by the combination of Mai's quiet strength and Jinwoo's unspoken affirmation. The guests, now fully engaged, observed the interplay of gestures, posture, and subtle communication, understanding that respect and recognition were being conveyed without a single word spoken. The faint aroma of fresh flowers and the subtle scent of brewed tea permeated the air, grounding the cinematic tableau in tangible reality while reinforcing the moral weight of the unfolding interaction. Mai's eyes, calm and focused, met Jinwoo's briefly, the silent exchange communicating gratitude, understanding, and recognition of the quiet courage that had been present throughout the evening. Each movement, from the precise placement of a teacup to the subtle adjustment of her uniform, emphasized the narrative of dignity maintained under observation, the calm assertion of character prevailing over transient displays of mockery. The soft reflections of light on the crystal and polished silverware highlighted the contrast between enduring grace and fleeting arrogance, emphasizing the power inherent in composure, patience, and unspoken acknowledgement. Jinwoo's subtle nod and the slight shift of his stance reinforced the silent communication, signaling to all present that the balance of respect had been restored, the previous humiliation transformed into an instructive moment of recognition. Guests responded almost imperceptibly, leaning forward slightly, softening expressions, and allowing their attention to remain fully on the quiet exchange, absorbing the lesson in character, endurance, and measured authority. The room, though filled with ornate furnishings, fine china, and the gentle ambient sounds of the city beyond the tall windows, had been transformed by the subtle interplay of observation, acknowledgement, and silent affirmation. The chandeliers above cast a steady, warm light that accentuated every gesture and nuance, emphasizing the cinematic quality of the moment and the delicate equilibrium of power and respect that had been achieved. Even the distant hum of traffic faded into the background, allowing the focus to remain on the central figures, their composed presence, and the quiet moral clarity of the scene. Each observer in the room felt the weight of the silent lesson, recognizing that true dignity is asserted not through loud demonstration, but through resilience, calmness, and the thoughtful acknowledgement of character, leaving a lasting impression of integrity, patience, and respect that would resonate well beyond the confines of the evening. The room fell into a contemplative stillness, each guest absorbing the subtle culmination of the evening's events, the quiet interplay between observation, acknowledgement, and composure leaving an indelible impression upon everyone present. Mai moved with deliberate grace, her hands arranging the final elements on the serving table, each action precise, measured, and full of understated authority, reflecting the strength of character that had quietly guided her through the earlier moments of tension. Jinwoo remained nearby, his posture commanding yet restrained, his eyes attentive, capturing the smallest shifts in expressions, the soft intake of breath, the subtle gestures that spoke volumes more than words ever could. The soft ambient light from the chandeliers above created reflections across the polished wood floors and crystal surfaces, highlighting the careful choreography of movement and attention that had transformed the atmosphere into one of reverent focus. Seo-yun, standing slightly apart, absorbed the unfolding dynamic with a dawning awareness that the simple act of enduring with poise had communicated far more than any display of force or authority. Her earlier attempts at asserting control now diminished in the face of quiet resilience. Guests, their expressions softened, became attuned to the nuances of interaction, noting the rhythm of careful gestures, the tilt of a head, the steady gaze, and the gentle acknowledgement of presence that reinforced the invisible hierarchy of respect now established. The faint scent of fresh flowers and the subtle aroma of tea and pastries intertwined, grounding the scene in reality even as the moral and emotional resonance of the moment deepened. Jinwoo's subtle gestures, a slight shift of his weight, the minimal movement of his hand across the back of a chair, served as silent affirmations of acknowledgement, reinforcing the message that dignity and character were recognized and valued without the need for loud declaration. Maya's eyes met his briefly, the exchange filled with quiet understanding, shared history, and the affirmation of integrity, her calm endurance radiating a powerful presence that required no amplification. The reflective surfaces of the room, the crystal glasses, the polished silver, the ornate woodwork, mirrored the careful orchestration of gestures and posture, emphasizing the cinematic quality of the moment, where the smallest actions carried profound significance. Guests leaned forward slightly, captivated by the precision and thoughtfulness of the exchange, sensing that patience, composure, and attentiveness had prevailed, demonstrating the enduring strength of character in the face of potential humiliation. The distant hum of the city beyond the large windows seemed to recede, allowing the focus to remain on the subtle interactions that defined the space. The interplay of light, gesture, and observation forming a tableau that conveyed moral clarity without a word spoken. Every subtle movement, glance, and shift in posture contributed to the overall resonance of the scene, reinforcing the lessons of respect, integrity, and the quiet, inescapable triumph of dignity over fleeting arrogance. As the soft ambient light highlighted the careful orchestration of attention and acknowledgement, the room collectively felt the weight of the silent assertion of character, the measured balance of authority and grace, and the profound, enduring impact of composure maintained under scrutiny, leaving each observer with an acute awareness of the subtle but undeniable power of true dignity. The grand dining hall settled into a profound, reflective stillness, the soft, golden light from the chandeliers illuminating the intricate details of the polished floors, crystal accents, and ornate furnishings, creating a serene yet charged atmosphere that seemed to hold time itself. Mai moved with the same deliberate grace she had exhibited throughout the evening, her hands carefully arranging the remaining plates and cups, each motion deliberate, precise, and measured, reinforcing the quiet authority that had emerged through her composure. Jinwoo remained close by, a silent pillar of support, his posture commanding yet restrained, his eyes capturing the subtleties of every glance, the faintest gestures, and the smallest shifts in energy throughout the room. Guests observed the interplay between the two with rapt attention, their earlier whispers and laughter replaced by a deep focus, understanding that what unfolded before them was a lesson in the subtle power of character, composure, and recognition. Seo-yeon, positioned slightly to the side, appeared diminished, her previous attempts at commanding attention now overshadowed by the quiet endurance and dignified presence of Mai, reinforced by Jinwoo's subtle, affirming presence. The soft aroma of tea, pastries, and fresh flowers lingered in the air, grounding the scene in tangible reality while the moral resonance of the evening deepened with each passing moment. Mai's eyes, steady and calm, met Jinwoo's briefly, communicating a silent understanding, gratitude, and acknowledgement of shared awareness, a recognition of the quiet strength that had been apparent throughout the events of the night. Each precise movement, from the gentle placement of a teacup to the subtle adjustment of her posture, reinforced the narrative of dignity maintained under scrutiny and the subtle assertion of respect without overt words. The reflective surfaces of the room, the crystal glasses, polished silverware, and glossy wood, captured the interplay of gestures and glances, amplifying the cinematic quality of the unfolding moment, while guests became increasingly attuned to the lessons embedded in these small, deliberate actions. Jinwoo's subtle gestures, A minimal nod or slight shift in stance reinforced the silent acknowledgement, signaling that the balance of respect and recognition had been restored, the quiet endurance of character rewarded through observation and affirmation. The gentle sway of the chandeliers above and the distant hum of the city beyond the tall windows provided a soft ambient backdrop that emphasized the stillness and significance of the room's central figures, highlighting the contrast between fleeting attempts at control and the enduring influence of composure and dignity. Every breath, every careful movement, and every glance contributed to a tableau of moral clarity, illustrating the inescapable truth that patience, grace, and integrity prevail in the face of superficial authority. Guests leaned slightly forward, softening expressions, their attention fully absorbed in the narrative of quiet triumph that had been meticulously woven through gesture, observation, and acknowledgement. As I completed the final placement of the items on the tray, and Jinwoo gave the slightest affirming nod, the room collectively exhaled, a shared recognition of the subtle, undeniable power of enduring dignity, leaving a lasting impression on all present, and sealing a moment where quiet respect and integrity spoke louder than any words ever could.